Hello there, everybody. Welcome to our panel on provisioning and zero-touch deployments. I'm Annie Halbert. I'm your moderator and cat herder today, and I'm going to let these gentlemen go down the line and introduce themselves.
Thank you very much. I'm Dave Cederer. I'm from SHI. I run the engineering practice around Apple.
I'm David Minima. I'm from Grand Rapids Christian Schools, and I'm the systems administrator.
Brian Messenger from Long Island, New York, Director of Classroom Instructional, long name.
Dave Cagle from Columbus, Ohio, 31 Gifts, system admin in charge of anything you could think of.
My name is Bill Cheney. I work at Benilde St. Margaret's School in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. I'm the help desk manager, teacher, and coach of 1,000,000 Sports.
Excellent. Let's give these gentlemen a round of applause. So the way this will kind of go today, we have a couple microphones. One there, I can't see the other one, it's there somewhere, where you can approach and ask questions. I also have some questions to get us started off, but the questions from the audience and on Twitter will be prioritized over mine, since that's why you're here. But to get us started off, let's talk about a hot topic among the provisioning workspace, imaging. So is it really dead? There's a big website where if you go to it, it says, is imaging dead? Yes. Discuss.
Honestly, that yes is I think, getting more and more pronounced with every OS release. I think we're seeing, at the very least, monolithic imaging has always had its place in the same way that that a lot of the older iOS configurations went, where everything has to be exactly the same. But with a lot of the user customization, I think that really does bring that the monolithic image hasn't made that much sense ever since we started thinking about users as people rather than as the recipient of a piece of technology. So I think it's almost a logical progression, and one that's being necessitated by technology that Apple's kind of pushing along.
Well, and speaking of the technology, it's my understanding that the T2 chip that's been added in the new macOS computers has really changed how imaging works, just as a basis.
Yeah, I think, with some of those new models, I think that really makes it hard for some of the old-fashioned ways we did things like computer labs, where you're freezing and re-imaging computers overnight. I think it gets in the boat where troubleshooting is a little more difficult for us because we're not able to net boot, jump onto some software that we know works, and be able to test, image, and do things from there. But then you start to think about it, and as we kind of move towards this more agile process and having individualized objects in our JSS to be able to do all of those things, it's so nice to be able to do it piece by piece rather than, I think about a few years ago when we were still imaging, having a teacher have a software problem that didn't have an easy solution, and you'd look at them and say, oh, we're going to have to re-image your computer. And you can imagine the look on their face when they all of a sudden have to go back and reset bookmarks and do all those little things. So, yeah.
I could say, because I think this is a really safe place, I don't know how to image a computer. And as you might have heard this morning, I went from a classroom position, an instructional leadership position, to now being in charge of 9,000 iPads and several hundred MacBooks, and we do have computer labs and art labs, and I could say with confidence that I don't know how to provision a computer. So if it's alive, I wasn't aware of it. I've heard of it, but we recently had to break one of one of my staff's hearts, where he wanted to re-image one of our Mac labs that we use with our art teachers. And we're like, no, we enrolled them all in Jamf for doing everything remotely. And he's like, wait, what? So we really took that away from him. He was sad, but.
In the provisioning and zero-touch deployment space, there are a lot of different Jamf stories about how we get devices into the hands of our end user. And do any of you have a particularly interesting workflow or Jamf story?
Yeah, so this year the beginning of this last school year, we refreshed our devices at Benilde St. Margaret's. So we got new MacBooks. It's a one-to-one program. Students keep their laptops all year. So working with administration and trying to come up with how do we support those devices year-round and making sure that was a possibility, we switched to Jamf Pro. And we really, really wanted to try this zero-touch deployment. We ended up passing out 1,300 computers in 2 days. We set up a theater, our school theater, with instructions. We show the kids kind of a acceptable use video that shows them not to drop it down the stairs, drink their coffee next to it, all those fun things. But then after that, they go through those basic instructions of how to log in. They get a sheet with their username and password, and they sign in, they grab their own case, they throw their box away, and they walk out the door with it. And then we run reports at the end of each of those events to see which students came and got their laptop, who didn't. We made sure the other ones were ready for the first day of school, but we passed out 96% of our computers in 2 days, which after spending summers and summers and summers re-imaging computers, this was a huge joy to have my summer back.
So another thing that I got out of what you said just now is that I should stop using my MacBook as a $2,000 coffee coaster.
That would be nice.
Okay, all right, that's great to know.
For me, my situation, I went from being the Mac support technician to the system administrator. So I upgraded from Jamf 9 to Jamf 10 as soon as I humanly possibly could when it was released. But in that instance, I also had to blow away my old way of doing things, that I was the only one who knew how to actually image the machine. So I had to redo my whole process, and also make it so that any technician who came into the business could follow the process. Going away from monolithic imaging and developing a provisioning process using custom triggers helped me build something that is very easy for me to maintain. If a new app comes through, now all I have to do is enter one line of code into a script, instead of coming up with a whole new image for that to include everything. One of my coworkers actually said after he ran through the process that he wished the Windows process was as easy as the Mac process.
That's high praise. Does anyone else have an additional Jamf story that they'd like to share?
Yeah, we did across 5 schools a rollout of 2,000 devices in about 5 days, and we have been pulling our devices back in during the summer, which is imaging dead. I haven't decided yet either. We went through the process of upgrading all the devices to High Sierra and hand doing it. I didn't get a summer. So, but what was nice is, hand that device back out to the student and watch them go through the process, understand what's going on their machine. I can write a script that says, well, right now we're installing Chrome, and we're going to get your printer drivers installed, and all of these things that the end user gets to see what's going on in their device, instead of, here's a device, and I really don't know what's on it. And so being able to give a student or a staff member that ability to look into what's coming to them and know that they're setting up their device. Yes, it's the way I want it to be, but they have a better understanding, and then they can personalize it from there. So.
Excellent. I'm going to pause for just a second to see if anyone has any questions from the audience. Don't be shy.
Hello, I have a question. This comes from online. Where do you see Nomad or Jamf Connect fitting into your provisioning workflows?
Great question.
I would say short answer is almost everywhere. We're seeing, and this has always been the strangest thing to me when I first heard about it, was even Microsoft is getting away from the traditional bind. Computers just don't stay in one place anymore. They're not a single building machine in the same way that they were years ago. So we're seeing Windows 10 is doing the same thing of this MDM management. So Nomad coming in, or Jamf Connect, now that you guys made a very smart purchase.
I for one, jumped up and down when I saw the announcement and gasped at work, and everyone thought something was wrong. It's just my pure excitement for knowing that Jamf was now in charge of Nomad.
I gave it a little bit of a yes.
Yep.
When I realized I never actually said what I do. I'm a Java engineer at Jamf, and the first thing I asked about the acquisition of Nomad was, when do we get to use it too? Because we get to make our own lives easier as well. So pretty excited for that. Yes, sir, what's your question?
Well, I'm going to switch from the one-to-one deployment model back to the lab models, because even as I've heard you gentlemen said that you do still have some public labs of Macs for specialty purposes such as, say, art labs or music labs and whatnot. I don't know if a lot of you gentlemen have read what I've heard about Adobe, and that is the device licensing model of installing Adobe Creative Cloud is dying, and it's dying within the year's time. So in your shared lab of, say, art Macs, you've got Adobe in there, and you've got kids that may be taking a higher level class and be in that class for, say, 9 weeks, but then the next 9 weeks you have a completely different population of kids. How would you handle the logistics of getting Adobe IDs to kids that need the software who are honestly taking those classes, or to staff members that may need it year-round, and then taking it back without making it an administrative nightmare?
I'm chuckling because we're doing this right now. But if I check my email right now and put it on the screen, you could probably see about 10 of them just about this. And the answer is I'm not sure yet from my perspective.
Okay.
We do have, each of our 5 schools has a dedicated lab of iMacs for our art department. Additionally, we also have art teachers, business education teachers,
Yep.
And people scattered throughout career and technical education who also want to make sure that they have Creative Cloud licensing. So we are still making sure we have the best way, especially now that last week we put 250 more MacBooks out there,
Yeah.
and those teachers are now saying, oh, I want that on my machine as well. We're figuring out the best and most cost-effective workflow, to say nothing of the students who want things on their iPads also. So my answer is it's a work in progress, and I'm curious to hear what anyone else has.
I'll share what my thought on it is, but I would first like to hear from all of you gentlemen, as many of you gentlemen as can care to respond to that. And I'll let you all pick or I'll share what my thought on what I might do is and see what you guys think of it, if nothing else.
We just switched our lab, so we switched with the user-based. We gave every student has their own Creative Cloud account. Every teacher has that. With Adobe's interesting choices in the pricing changes for the last few years, it put us in a really tough place. As an environment with 1,300 students with a one-to-one program, that user-based pricing just wasn't feasible.
No.
Luckily, we talked to the right people at Adobe. They were able to work with us and find a solution to realize we're trying to put their product in students' hands.
Exactly.
And as we moved into the user-based licensing, it was a tough transition, obviously, having to pull the old Adobe licensing out, reinstall Creative Cloud, have every kid have their own account. In the labs, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting at, we ended up having user licenses for each lab computer. So each we have, BSM Lab 1, BSM Lab 2 for each of those devices. The only thing we run into problems with is if kids choose to start pulling things into the Creative Cloud account, if they're downloading additional fonts, if they're downloading plugins and things like that. If they switch computers the next day, the teachers will somehow, oh, it was here yesterday, I don't know.
Yeah, their stuff in the cloud wouldn't be there anymore.
So that's hard, but with the one-to-one program, because most of that is done on their own laptops now, we don't see as many of that problems because we're back to the user-based.
Okay.
I'm lucky, because it's a business, we don't have labs. So
Fair
don't have
enough.
hurdle.
That's a
But
fair
what I
answer.
can say is, what isn't fun is having to redeploy the user IDs when you, if you decide to go with another reseller for your licenses. Because you can't keep the same portal. So
That's
I had-
correct. You
I had to go
actually
through
get a
the
new
process
instance.
of uninviting 75 people and reinviting them, and then making sure they clicked on the correct link, reset the password, and all that.
See, that's exactly the heart of what I'm getting to with this lab thing is the one solution I was able to come up with in my head, and I haven't implemented this yet, but so in PowerSchool, I can export custom reports to see, hey, a kid's taking Art 3, they need access to this. If I can get that formatted in a CSV file, and then had some way to upload said CSV file to Adobe, to activate and deactivate stuff. I can only hope Adobe's watching this. I highly doubt it. But if I had some way to do that, I could see that working, because you can deploy the software at will to the labs. You just wouldn't activate it. The kids would.
Yep.
I don't, would you guys care to maybe come up with an idea how you might automate such a process?
I mean, my first instinct, which is usually my first instinct for a lot of things, is UI scripting. Basically, just about any web page has a lot of structure to it, and once you kind of get down to the end of that, being able to take a list from from one spot to another, not necessarily having to strip out HTML, just getting some real nice just text, being able to dump that out to the desktop, re-upload that. I think that would just be at least my approach to the situation.
Okay. So it sounds like everybody's in the same boat I'm in on this, basically, and we all got to figure out what to do. All right, thank you.
If you don't know Carl from Adobe, look him up.
Who?
Carl, who at least a couple years ago, he ran the Creative Cloud.
Carl from Adobe. I will make note of that.
Last name.
You may want to join us next year.
Actually, I would not object to that.
Awesome.
You were saying that you did a large deployment in a hall or a theatre of MacBooks. How did you go with bandwidth? Were you sort of limiting what they're actually installing?
Extra access points. I mean, really, what we found, ironically, the choke point was our LDAP. As we had the students hit that sheet where they typed in their username and password, we had big drags of time where kids had trouble getting through there. But what we did is we just push the basics. We didn't push a lot of apps and things right away. We did it about 2 weeks before school, so I got to get fun response and be able to tell the kids, go home and watch Netflix for the next couple days. And you see their parents in the back kind of roll their eyes, but it was kind of nice as they left, we go and turn all those policies back on. So by the time they get home over those next 2 weeks, they're able to load up all that software at home. And then when they get back to school, anything they might be missing, we have on our distribution points. So it moves a little faster, it stays local, and we're not pulling everything from Amazon.
So was there any pushback from parents or issues with people not having available bandwidth at home? Not every
really.
Country is like ours, where people have slow internet.
we haven't. This is the second year we've done the full year laptops at home. We don't collect them in the summer. They do their OS updates themselves and everything. We have not. I'm yet to have a teacher, or excuse me, a parent complaint about that. It is a lot of bandwidth, but we take some of those really big ones, like the Office updates, like Adobe and things like that, and we provision them to only happen at school to try to alleviate a little bit. But the Flash, the browser updates, and some of those incremental things that we try to do at home, and it doesn't, like I said, we haven't seen any issues with it.
Awesome, thanks.
We pace ourselves. Just another tip. One thing we've done, we roll out 3,000 devices every September, and then we also collect all of our devices over the summer and give them back in the fall. And that creates an incredible load on all of our systems. Well, what we've done for the rollouts is we'll stagger the process over 2 days. Step 1, log in, put in your remote management credentials, go home. And the students who have Wi-Fi, it'll connect. Those that don't, it's okay. Then when they come back the next day, we have teachers walk them through several other steps of here's self-service, here's the apps, where we have created a culture where it's spaced out over a couple of days, and that keeps things pretty manageable for us.
It's interesting you use the word culture. Did you have trouble with that transition from culture? Because often the technical side of things are easy to fix and you know the solution, but getting everybody else to change, the school to understand you can't just have 600 people in a hall.
Culture is the hardest thing to change. We had an added bonus that we're only in our 3rd year. So there's not a lot of muscle memory for, well, last year we did X, Y, and Z, so we had that advantage of the first rollout, we went, let's do it all in one night. I went, oh, no, let's not do that again. And then we moved on from there, and it's been working pretty well.
Has anybody else had come across issues with culture change, with zero-touch deployments rather than here's everything already built?
We did a little bit, just trying to get our teachers and try to offload it into homerooms and some of those classes where we could do some of it in those first few days of school. There's a little pushback because obviously teachers have so much to do throughout the year and time's money for them. So to be able to take time from them was hard, but to be able to have those teachers help, we found really works in the long run, because now those teachers who can walk through the setup at the beginning, they're a little better at supporting it. So we have, hopefully, our teachers are a little better about not sending kids straight down to the help desk, and they can try some of those simple things from the beginning of the year when they walk through that process.
We also, we train specific departments of teachers. So let's say, all right, you're going to get your iPad set up for you in social studies class. That way, when a student has that subject, it forces it to be staggered throughout the day. So it's not everyone 8 a.m. doing everything. It's when you have that class at some point in your day, which staggers the use out.
Yeah, we had quite the culture shock in one of our buildings, because previously, I mean, with imaging, we'd hand out a device and it was done. And they could go off and they knew everything was on that device and we wouldn't have any issue. Well, you know, it was zero touch and a full class of kids. And unfortunately, we weren't thinking ahead with adding an extra access point. It's a slow process. So it's 45 minutes and these kids are sitting there, you know, waiting for all their stuff. And teachers are ticked off that my kid doesn't have Google Chrome. They can't figure out how to get online because no one knows what Safari is, apparently. But
you can't customize Safari like you can.
But yeah, so you know, we're having to retrain teachers that, you know, this does take time. We did the same process with all of them 3 weeks earlier to give them that idea of this does take time. You need to better understand or plan your day. You don't have a technology device for your first day, but you know, moving forward, everything will be there. So.
All right, thank you.
We have a 3-year hardware refresh, and we've moved in that time frame to touchless deployment, and we've struggled with migrating user data without giving it to our on-site support technicians and having them take an hour of moving data and then having it not really be a touchless deployment. Are you guys dealing with that, or how would you?
We're enforcing OneDrive.
We use it as well, but not everyone.
That's how we're dealing with that.
Our students on the first day, we have them install Google Sync and Backup on their devices. So they learn pretty early where they're saving files, what's uploaded to the cloud, and then upon getting their new computer, one of the first things they do in class is download that app, they log in with their credentials, and that starts pulling their data back. We find that super beneficial with our teachers too. Forget your laptop at home for the day, your lesson plan is sitting there. It's pretty easy to log in on another machine and pull those pieces of data down. So.
Yeah, we use Google Drive as well, and I've told students and staff, you know, there might be a time where we have to erase your device. You better have your stuff backed up. We're not, we see too many devices every day that we're not looking to see if, you know, that one obsolete font file is being backed up. Please make sure you have that taken care of, and we try and train our users to be self-sufficient in that aspect. So data migration, I put tools out in self-service for people to use, and we explain here's how to look through it, but if you miss it, you miss it. You know, I think it's a good learning experience being in a school. You know, even teachers need to learn.
I've been seeing a lot of Code 42 also coming up in business. They tend to be pretty good on user migration. It's a very, very simple process. So that's they've been coming up more and more that we've been seeing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we offer Google, OneDrive, and iCloud for all of our staff and all of our students. And we had our first grade get the new cycle of iPads this year, and wasn't so sure how it was going to work out, and thankfully that culture was there again, where we repeatedly communicated with students, teachers, parents, sent out a ton of messages saying anything not on the cloud will not be there in September because it will be a new device. And thankfully we managed to come out from that unscathed. I think I got one call from someone who said, something's gone, and other than that, everyone jumped on the clouds, which we're very happy with.
It's been a culture shock in our organization to switch to OneDrive.
Yeah.
But what my coworkers and I have done is anytime anyone gets an upgrade, we move all their stuff to OneDrive for the end user, and then explain to them when they get their machine back this is the preferred business location to save your files. It's backed up in the cloud. It syncs across devices. You can even access it on your phone, and that's the one that they always go, oh, I can? And they get really excited, so.
Cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're moving away from imaging, and we're like 90% of the way there. But we don't really enforce too many things as far as settings that are forced upon the user. We set it for them and then let them change it from there. So configuration profiles inherently lock that setting down. And I know about the set once flag, but on our initial test, it seemed to sometimes work, sometimes didn't. Maybe it was a coding error. But are there any settings that you guys generally set once and then leave for the user to change? And then do you do it via just scripts at launch, like writing the defaults, or config profiles with set once, or do you have something else that you use?
I honestly, during my provisioning process, have used the majority of my first boot script that I used when I imaged. So yeah, we use default commands. I did find a tool called, I want to say it's Outset, that essentially you can put scripts and stuff out there and have it run once. And so that's a tool I'm looking for to try and get rid of using the defaults command, because I know that's something that Apple's trying to tell you probably shouldn't be using it. And so we set all our set once things with defaults, but we'll look to another product here in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I have a three-part. First one, I'm assuming everybody's using DEP for your standard zero-touch policy. Are you guys using anything separate for any different types of scenarios? With the downloads and updates, are you guys using caching server, or what are you guys doing for that now that software update server is kind of gone? Are you using Reposado, something different? So I'll start with those two.
I actually have some machines that I cannot get into DEP due to age or lack of purchase information. So I've developed it's not exactly the same, but utilizing the Apple Online Restore, where you can actually boot the machine into the online restore from Apple.
Oh, like the internet recovery?
Yeah, you can do an internet recovery and wipe the device so that it's like new. And then I just have a process for my technicians to follow that. They create a shared admin account, and then they log in and they can manually enroll the device using a publicly facing URL, and then go into self-service and then click the button. So essentially it adds a few steps, but it's a situation where we can't use DEP because the device is just too old and we need to repurpose it, or we're setting it up for something, but it gives them a similar feel because it's not a big deviation from what they're already doing.
Yes to DEP completely, and yes to caching servers. We just updated and upgraded our equipment 2 weeks ago, and just watching the difference it's made is really impressive.
Yes to DEP, but again, we don't have some devices in there, and I take advantage of the High Sierra erase and install and install package piece. So the quick add package and stuff can get installed in that process. So when I reinstall the OS, I'll drop a quick add package and a few other different pieces, so that way that device starts talking to Jamf as soon as it can. And then we don't have any caching servers at the moment. There's plans to it, but
just all out to the internet.
It's internally. I mean, we had our distribution point. We run that internally, and then everything else is out to the internet.
And then, are you guys using like Splash Buddy or Dep Notify or like anything different for post?
I looked at both those products, and because I have to wear so many different admin hats at my job, I couldn't find the time to use them. So I just have more of some visual cues for my technicians to know when things are going. But because IBM made theirs open source, I'm very excited to dig into that and see if I can apply it in my organization.
We've been using Splash Buddy to give everybody that insight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for being here. I have one question that kind of diverges based on your answer. Playing off the first question, have any of you considered not binding to Active Directory? If so, what did you consider? And have you looked into Jamf Connect? And if you can't leave the bind behind, what are you doing for the process with DEP?
We killed it this year. We're on Nomad login. So we still hand out our Active Directory credentials to staff and students, allow Nomad login to authenticate to the device, create a local account, and then haven't upgraded Nomad yet, but hopefully here shortly we'll get to the point where it saves the keychain password and passes that off to Nomad to mount servers, print, all of that piece. But yeah, we killed binding this past year due to too many devices and trust relationship issues, and it was just too much of a headache. So we've been extremely happy with Nomad login and Nomad, and yeah.
I see the majority of you shaking your head up and down. Like is that how everyone's going? Is Nomad?
I was lucky. My organization was never a fan of it, so I walked in and nothing was bound. We just did the 2 passwords for each user scenario for a while. I'm going to be digging into Jamf Connect as soon as I get back to the office to hopefully to see if we can get it into our environment. But yeah, we've never bound any of our Macs, and it hasn't really ever caused too many issues.
Awesome. Then it makes the next question a little bit easier because I can expect a lot of responses. What did you guys do to adopt Nomad/Jamf Connect? Mostly Nomad, since no one seems to have it yet.
I mean, we went out and knew that we were having our issues with Active Directory, so we had a conversation first with Apple about Enterprise Connect and what that looked like. But Enterprise Connect can't get you that initial login through Active Directory. So, and that's where Nomad login shined. And you know, after the first phone call with Apple and Enterprise Connect, and my boss is asking questions, some other guys on our team are asking questions, and they're answering things, and I'm shaking my head going, but Nomad can do all of this, and it's better, and it's free. And at that point, they're like, well, is there anything I can pay for to eventually get support if we need it? Yeah, let's sign off on it and go. There wasn't beyond that, there's not that big of an issue. It's just worked really well.
I've had to talk to a lot of organizations about the, especially around binding the older folks that are very, very set in their ways, and really Nomad has helped bridge that gap of, at the very least, it behaves a lot more like a bound machine than it did before.
Okay. Are any of you looking to do Azure? Is that something that's going to be a thing a bridge you have to cross in the future? And then Jamf Connect steps in, and is that something that you're concerned about pitching the costs, then Enterprise Connect versus Jamf Connect? But it seems some of you, it doesn't provide that login solution, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Thank you.
We're pretty tied in with Google. So my network administrator, who's a big Windows guy, has been pushing for going to it in the last year or two. But because we're so tied to Google and because of the fiscal hook you'd be on for switching over to it, we haven't jumped yet. But I think we are looking at the possibility of using it soon.
We currently have Azure in our environment. I just haven't done the setup yet to try to hook into it.
First off, thank you guys for being here. Lots of great information. Sounds like Nomad's the way to go, so I already got that one out of the way. In terms of when you guys are building it out, we've got some stuff already automating, but it doesn't have like the Splash Buddy stuff. What were some hurdles or things you guys ran into that you didn't see coming, or apps that you thought, oh, this will be easy to deploy, and it turned out to be a little bit of a nightmare? And what resources do you guys leverage, and what resources have you guys out there that we can tap into to know what the pitfalls were?
One of the big hurdles that I had was passing PCI compliance. Just some food for thought. There are certain PCI failures that I think it's HSTS is the term. I'll throw this out there. Tomcat on the Jamf servers does not natively support it, so you cannot enable it on the Jamf side. You need to be very nice to your network admin and have him enable it, he or she enable it on whatever firewall you use. We use an F5, so through the the way our F5 was set up, it was enabled on that end, which made I passed PCI compliance, and that allowed me to have externally facing a URL and then set up Amazon Web Services for a cloud distribution point, which saved me a ton of time and hassle. If anyone in here has actually set up an internal server that's available external, I'd love to hear how you did it, because it posed too many security risks for us. So.
Yeah, we're on the cloud version of Jamf, and
either
it's
Jamf
a dream,
Cloud,
so.
or if you can work with Amazon Web Services to set up a cloud distribution point through them. That's
we love it. We have offices all over, and so we're trying to now figure out that next step of, I've got an office in the UK, I don't want to have to fly over or ship computers anymore. I just want to be able to image, and hopefully that's the biggest hurdle, is just getting that going. But like just figuring out what apps didn't work right away would be like the biggest thing, I think, for us.
I think some of it is just testing and what, I mean, you all know Jamf Nation. I mean, I can't say enough, when we go into the summer and we start thinking about what apps need to be updated regularly, what do we need to install once, what do people want changed, what were some of the big things in the help desk that we maybe fixed repeatedly that we'd like to try to fix for the next year. What really helped us was writing it all out, was actually putting it on paper, going through and seeing, do we have something quick, has it worked in the past, and if not, let's go to Jamf Nation and let's see what other people are doing. Let's see if there's already scripts written, if there's already packages and things built, because that makes it so much easier. Then if you do have problems, you have a whole community to reach out to, and it makes it so much easier.
Awesome. I use Jamf Nation to help me set up the provisioning script using custom triggers. It makes my life so much easier versus the old way of doing it. Now I can just, I have a script that just basically runs through and calls the trigger, install Office, install Creative Cloud, install Chrome, install Fire, bing, 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 and all I have to update is the package file for the app. And I don't have to think about it anymore. But Jamf Nation, I found it on Jamf Nation. Found something that Rich Troughton had posted about, a first run script that helped me. Used his guide to set up AWS. So definitely Jamf Nation. Ask questions. I've never felt intimidated by asking questions on Jamf Nation. So it's one of the great resources we have as Mac admins.
I definitely want to echo that too. Most management solutions, there is, if you do a Google search for stuff on like AirWatch or Mobile Iron, you're lucky if you get a result. And having an actual community full of people using software, talking to each other, it's proved useful more times than I can count in just about everything.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. I think we get our citizenship now, right?
Again, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I'm being told from our network administrators that we need to be bound to AD for ICE security on the network, where the network ports are blocked, and that's all done with certificates and Active Directory binding. Have you had any experience with that? Have you been able to make that work with Nomad?
We had a little bit of that where ICE was having problems pulling certain user data. So as we're trying to track what computers are doing what, where our web traffic is going, and just users signing on using 802.1x, we saw a little bit of problems with that. But when we stepped back and started looking at with our web filter, with all the other things we have in the building, we kind of presented to our technology group that maybe we don't need it in there. Maybe we can track those through other ways. We haven't had issues with connectivity or anything like that. The only thing we run into, like I said, is some of the logging doesn't pull the user data as well, but we always have MAC addresses. So it's something where if the data maybe doesn't line up or doesn't have a user attached to it because it isn't bound, we're still able to go back, look at the MAC address. That's a quick search in Jamf, and I know exactly what was going on.
Cool. Yeah, we've traditionally been a separate, self-supported small group of Macs from central IT, and now we've installed Jamf to try to comply with a lot of the central IT policies, and it looks like we're going to be growing up from 20 Macs to 1,000, and I'm really curious to get your advice as if you could go back and do it differently. What kind of advice would you recommend for somebody who's in this position, who's small in Jamf but is planning on getting bigger? How do we make a good process for ourselves and also for our users?
I would say the biggest thing is light touch and learn as you go. It's if you were to kind of take from your Windows guys and say, okay, we do 500 different things on our Windows machines, and we want to do that on the Mac. Stepping back and going, okay, well, why are we doing these things rather than, okay, let's try to force this all into a single box. That's a lot of success that we've seen from customers has really been from having the right policies in place, having people actually want to be a part of the managed network because they're actually getting a benefit out of that. The more you can benefit your users, I think the happier your base goes, and that'll just kind of, the organic growth really comes with it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, I have one more question before we start to wrap up today. So one of the most exciting things, in my opinion, as an engineer, announced at the keynote yesterday, was the addition of the await config option in pre-stage enrollments in the device enrollment program. And that allows you to install enrollment packages on macOS Mojave machines. And so I just wanted to get a quick read on what was going through your minds when that was announced and what you think you'll use it for.
I'm extremely excited. We, during our main deployment, ran into some issue of you'd get to, I mean, we skipped creating the user because we want the user to log in with their AD credentials, and you sit at a login window for who knows how long, and waiting for that, that Nomad login piece to drop, and then show up. So you see the screen blip a few times, and that await config that shows up, during the setup process. I know I'm going to get a login screen that a kid can log into right away instead of getting a hand raised and, I can't log in. Well, how long do you wait? Half a second. So that in and of itself, that I can get a screen that is the same across every device right off the bat, and you don't have kids waiting. Sometimes we've seen up to 10 minutes, depending on our bandwidth issues. So
I'm very excited to use it to set some things that don't necessarily need to be seen by whoever's provisioning the device anymore. We still set a standard dock for our end users. It'd be nice if that just happened and no one had to watch it bounce. So.
Yeah, I think about the packages as I go through and we set up our computers, to not get that delay state change where you get a delay from Jamf because you switch networks. So if you change your computer name, if you install OpenDNS, there's so many things that if you can get some of those things installed ahead of time before the user gets in for the first time, they're not going to see some of those big delays waiting for the next policy to pull or the next script to run. I just think it's going to make, kind of what he was saying, a lot smoother for those first few minutes on your device.
Well, go ahead.
I would just wanted to say that it's kind of a very good balance between hiding and transparency, as weird as that is.
Yes.
Because you do want to give information to the user that something's happening, but yeah, at the same time, not necessarily giving them the nitty-gritty of the random things that keep flashing up on the screen when you don't expect them. So yeah, good thing.
Well, thank you everyone for joining our Zero Touch and Provisioning deployment today. If you had a question that didn't get answered, feel free to come up and have a chat with us afterwards, but please join me in thanking everyone for their time here today. Thank you.